It started with a schedule no one inside Buckingham Palace was suddenly allowed to touch. Not aides, not private secretaries, not even Queen Camilla's most trusted household advisors. And when Prince William quietly approved a new Regency contingency framework tied directly to Catherine's recovery calendar, palace insiders realized this was no ordinary administrative shift. It was a silent declaration of power one that reportedly stripped Camilla from every major decision surrounding the Princess of Wales. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For weeks, the palace had tried to make it look routine. A diary adjustment here, a postponed appearance there, a careful statement about Catherine needing space, time, and privacy. But behind those polished words, reports suggest something far more serious was unfolding inside the royal machine. William was no longer simply protecting his wife from public pressure. He was protecting her from the palace itself. The alleged Regency preparedness plan did not arrive with noise. It moved quietly, through redirected emails, cancelled briefings, and suddenly tightened chains of approval. Senior aides who once expected updates through wider household channels were reportedly told that anything involving Catherine's public duties, medical pacing, or future engagements would now move through Kensington Palace first. Not Clarence House, not Camilla's office, not any advisor acting on old influence. Kensington alone. That was the moment, insiders claim, when the temperature inside the monarchy changed, because schedules are never just schedules in royal life. They decide who appears strong, who appears absent, who controls the story, and who stands closest to the future. For William, Catherine's recovery could not become another palace performance, shaped by pressure, optics, or anyone else's hunger for control. Her return had to be measured, protected, untouched by political hands. Camilla's circle reportedly saw the move as a direct freeze on their authority. For years, her household had grown more visible, especially as King Charles faced health struggles and the monarchy leaned on carefully managed appearances. But William's decision drew a hard line through that old structure. Catherine was not to be pushed forward before she was ready. Her calendar would not be used to calm headlines. Her health would not become currency in a palace power game. And Catherine, according to whispers, understood the weight of what her husband had done. This was not rebellion for its own sake. It was a shield. A quiet, brutal shield placed around the woman many now see as the emotional center of the monarchy's next chapter. Overnight, the balance of power appeared to tilt away from Camilla's influence and toward William's future court. But behind William's quiet restructuring was a deeper fear, one tied not only to Catherine's future, but to who would truly control the monarchy if King Charles became too weak to intervene. For years, palace operations functioned through invisible networks of influence: private secretaries, household advisors, diary managers, and royal schedulers, quietly shaping the monarchy's public image. But according to reports now circulating among royal insiders, Catherine's illness changed everything. William allegedly no longer trusted the old structure, and at the center of his growing suspicion stood Queen Camilla's expanding authority inside the palace machine. Since King Charles's health struggles became a defining concern for the monarchy, the center of palace control had reportedly begun to shift. Not through dramatic announcements, but through access, through who received briefings first, through who shaped the public calendar, through which household had the quiet power to say yes, delay, soften, or push forward. And in that delicate space, Camilla's influence was said to have grown stronger, especially as the king's attention became divided between duty, treatment, and the burden of holding the crown together. Clarence House advisors allegedly became more involved in coordinating appearances, not only for the king and queen, but across the wider royal rhythm. To outsiders, this may have looked like efficiency. To William's circle, reports suggest it looked like danger. Because Catherine was not merely another working royal who could be moved across a calendar to calm the public. She was recovering. She was vulnerable. And she was also, in William's eyes, the future heart of the monarchy. That was where the disagreement reportedly began. Some inside the palace believed Catherine's return had to be visible enough to reassure the nation. William's team allegedly believed any pressure, even polite pressure, was reckless. They feared that image was being placed above health, that public comfort was being valued above private recovery, and that Catherine's name was being used as a stabilizing tool before she was ready to carry that weight again. For William, this crossed a line. The old palace machine had always demanded sacrifice. Queen Elizabeth II understood that better than anyone. But even she, according to those who study her reign, knew when the heir and the heir's family had to be protected from the machinery around them. Duty mattered. But timing mattered too. Strength was not always about appearing in public. Sometimes strength was refusing to be rushed. That is why the phrase duty over visibility reportedly began moving through William's private strategy. It was not a slogan for the public. It was a warning to the palace. Catherine's recovery would not be shaped by optics. Her schedule would not be pulled apart by competing households. Her future would not be negotiated by people who saw appearances as ammunition. And so, the quiet suspicion hardened into something colder. William no longer saw the old structure as neutral. He saw it as a risk. And if Camilla's growing authority stood too close to Catherine's calendar, then that authority had to be cut back before it became impossible to stop. And while the public saw carefully staged smiles and controlled appearances, insiders whisper that a private confrontation was already unfolding behind closed palace doors. The change did not arrive with speeches, announcements, or public decrees. It arrived through silence. Meetings Camilla's aides once attended suddenly moved without notice. Documents reportedly stopped flowing through traditional channels. Invitations tied to Catherine's calendar allegedly required Kensington authorization alone. And according to various interpretations of the situation, Camilla's household realized too late that William had already moved decisively. Inside the palace, silence can be louder than any confrontation. A door that no longer opens. A briefing that no longer includes the same names. A diary note that suddenly bypasses one household and lands directly with another. That, reports suggest, was how the freeze began. Not with humiliation in public, but with a quiet tightening of control so precise that by the time anyone understood it, the old channels had already been dismantled. Kensington Palace allegedly centralized every Catherine-related decision with ruthless calm. Medical updates, appearance planning, charity timelines, family movement, and even the language around her recovery were reportedly pulled into a narrower circle. Camilla's longtime advisors, once accustomed to being aware of wider royal coordination, allegedly found themselves excluded from the most sensitive briefings. They were not publicly dismissed. They were simply no longer needed. That was the brutality of it. William did not have to accuse anyone. He did not have to raise his voice. He only had to change the route of authority. And in royal life, the route is everything. Whoever controls the paper, controls the pace. Whoever controls the calendar, controls the image. Whoever controls access, controls the future. Royal staff were reportedly instructed not to discuss Catherine's recovery beyond approved channels, a move that intensified the feeling that a protective wall had gone up around the Princess of Wales. William, according to palace whispers, saw Catherine as more than a beloved wife or future queen. He saw her as the stabilizing force the monarchy would need when the present reign became too fragile to carry the entire burden alone. Her health was no longer a private matter only. It had become part of the crown's survival strategy. Insiders described the shift as bureaucratic warfare conducted in total silence. And for those who understood palace history, the comparison was immediate. Princess Anne, the iron-willed royal who never needed theatrics to enforce discipline. Her style was not emotional, it was procedural. Remove access, close loopholes, end confusion. William's move reportedly carried that same unforgiving energy. King Charles, meanwhile, was said to be exhausted by the growing strain. Caught between wife, son, health, and institution, he could no longer easily soften every fracture. And outside the private rooms, media observers began noticing what palace insiders already sensed. William and Camilla seemed increasingly separate, not only in mood, but in power. But William's restructuring was not simply about protecting Catherine's health, it was about preparing for a future many inside the palace feared was arriving faster than expected. Then came the whispers that changed the entire meaning of the conflict. Palace administrative streams, ranging from security discussions to diary coordination leaks, began referencing something far larger than scheduling disputes: a Regency framework. And within that alleged framework, Prince William, not Camilla, would oversee every critical decision connected to Catherine, the children, and the future image of the crown. That was when the palace mood reportedly shifted from tense to alarmed. Because a schedule can be explained away, a private disagreement can be softened, a household dispute can be hidden behind smiles and carefully chosen words. But a Regency framework suggests preparation. It suggests fear. It suggests that people inside the monarchy were no longer asking only how to manage the present, they were quietly asking what would happen if the king's strength could no longer carry the weight of the crown. Reports suggest contingency discussions had intensified as Charles's health remained a private concern inside royal operations. Nothing was said openly. Nothing was placed before the public as panic. But behind the controlled language, William allegedly began building what insiders described as a protective governance structure around Catherine and the children. It was not just about who approved engagements. It was about who would guard the emotional and institutional center of the next reign if the monarchy entered a sudden period of instability. And in that structure, Camilla's role reportedly narrowed, not erased from public life, not openly challenged as queen, but pushed away from the most sensitive decisions surrounding the Wales household. That distinction mattered, because it allowed William to move with discipline, not spectacle. He did not need to start a family war in public. He only needed to make sure that when the future was being shaped, Catherine's recovery, George's preparation, Charlotte's protection, and Louis's stability sat firmly under his authority. Insiders claim this was where Queen Elizabeth II's old philosophy returned like a shadow over the palace. The heir must be protected before the institution can be protected. The crown survives not by pleasing every faction, but by securing the line of continuity. And William, reportedly drawing from that heir-first instinct, began treating the Wales family not as one household among many, but as the living bridge between a fragile present and a future reign. The rumored doctrine soon had a name whispered among those watching the shift: the Heirs' Accord. It was said to represent an understanding between William and trusted senior royals that Catherine must be shielded from palace pressure, political maneuvering, and any attempt to use her public return as proof that all was well. Princess Anne, according to palace whispers, allegedly supported the logic. Not sentimentally, strategically. For Camilla, this reportedly raised a chilling possibility: long-term marginalization before the transition had even officially begun. The future monarchy was quietly consolidating around Kensington Palace. And as William tightened control around the future of the crown, one question began haunting palace corridors more than any other: how far would Camilla go to preserve her influence before the transition became permanent? By early 2026, reports suggest the emotional divide inside the royal family had become impossible to conceal. Joint planning sessions reportedly grew tense. Advisors stopped sharing information freely. Separate household strategies emerged. And while the monarchy publicly projected unity, insiders whisper that two competing visions of royal power were now operating under the same roof. On one side stood William's camp, focused on survival, restraint, and the careful rebuilding of trust around the future crown. Their belief was simple but unforgiving: the monarchy could not afford another season of confusion. Catherine's recovery had to be protected, the children had to remain shielded, and the next reign had to be prepared with discipline before crisis forced it into the open. To them, modernization did not mean chasing attention. It meant controlling the pace before the institution lost control of itself. On the other side, Camilla's allies reportedly feared something colder: not only a loss of influence, but a slow removal from the center of royal decision-making. Ceremonial access, household authority, diary influence, and the quiet prestige of being close to power were all suddenly under pressure. For those who had built their position around the present reign, William's tightening circle felt like the future arriving without invitation. Senior courtiers were allegedly caught in the middle, watching every move, every silence, every delayed message. Loyalty inside palace walls is rarely spoken plainly. It is shown through who receives information first, who gets invited into meetings, and who is left waiting outside the room. By then, insiders claim, even routine coordination carried a hidden message. The monarchy still looked united to the public, but inside, the machinery had split into competing rhythms. And at the heart of it all stood Catherine. Her absence had created worry, but her quiet strength had created something even more powerful: loyalty. The public did not see her as a political figure inside the palace struggle. They saw her as the emotional center of the monarchy's future, a woman recovering under immense pressure while others argued over timing, appearances, and control. That made William even more determined not to overexpose her. Reports suggest he remembered the old lesson of Queen Elizabeth II: succession stability must be guarded before it is celebrated. The crown survives because its future is protected in advance, not at the last moment, not after damage has been done. And in William's mind, Catherine and the children were no longer simply family. They were the living foundation of what came next. King Charles, according to palace whispers, was emotionally torn. Wife on one side, son on the other. Institution above them both, but the strain of health, duty, and family pressure left him unable to act as the great mediator everyone once expected. Royal commentators began calling it the firm before the family unfolding in real time. But the final turning point came when William reportedly made one chilling realization: the future of the monarchy could no longer depend on compromise. According to various palace interpretations, the decisive moment arrived during a closed-door strategy meeting tied to Catherine's long-term recovery calendar. William reportedly listened quietly as competing advisors debated optics, appearances, and public timelines. Then, in what insiders now describe as a cold and surgical intervention, he allegedly ended the debate entirely. Catherine's schedule would answer only to him. For those inside the room, the decision reportedly landed like a final verdict. There would be no more overlapping authority, no more blurred lines between households, no more quiet pressure from advisors who saw Catherine's return as a tool for public reassurance. William had allowed the debate to continue only until he understood the true danger. Then, He cut through it with the force of a future king, who had learned that hesitation can become its own betrayal. From that point forward, all Catherine-related approvals were allegedly routed through Kensington Palace exclusively. Her public appearances, recovery pace, charity commitments, family obligations, and ceremonial duties would move through one protected channel. Not because William wanted a family victory, but because he believed the institution itself had become too fragile for divided command. One message, one authority, one shield around the woman who would one day stand beside him as queen. Camilla's advisory role surrounding Catherine was reportedly neutralized without the spectacle of open humiliation. That was what made the move so powerful. It was not a shouting match. It was not a public rebuke. It was administration used as a blade. Access was narrowed. Influence was frozen. The machinery that once allowed multiple voices to shape Catherine's schedule was quietly dismantled, leaving Camilla's circle outside the most sensitive decisions. William, according to palace whispers, framed the decision as institutional protection rather than personal retaliation. He was not punishing Camilla, insiders insist. He was protecting continuity. And in the brutal language of monarchy, continuity matters more than comfort. Catherine could not be treated as a symbol to be rushed back into view. She was a person recovering under pressure, but she was also part of the future sovereign structure. To expose her too early would not only risk her peace, it would risk the stability of what came next. That was when references reportedly began emerging to the Regency shield, an internal doctrine designed to protect the heirs, the Wales household, and the future image of the crown from interference during vulnerable periods. Princess Anne, according to whispers, privately respected William's firmness. Anne understood that royal survival is not always preserved through warmth. Sometimes it is preserved through discipline, boundaries, and decisions that hurt before they heal. Public sympathy, meanwhile, continued moving toward Catherine and William. The more carefully they guarded her, the more people seemed to understand the pain behind the silence. And slowly, the monarchy began reorganizing itself around the next generation. And while no formal declaration was ever made, palace insiders understood the message instantly. The future reign had already begun taking shape behind the scenes. Something subtle but unmistakable reportedly began happening across royal operations. More events centered around William. More diplomatic focus shifted toward Catherine. More senior aides quietly aligned themselves with Kensington Palace instead of Clarence House. It was not a revolution. It was quieter than that, more dangerous. A gradual transfer of gravity inside the House of Windsor itself. William was increasingly viewed not only as the heir, but as the acting stabilizer of a monarchy caught between illness, uncertainty, and transition. He did not need to take the crown to begin carrying its weight. Reports suggest that private decisions, public messaging, and long-term planning slowly began bending toward his judgment. The more fragile the present felt, the more necessary William's authority appeared. And with every careful move, Kensington Palace became less like a household and more like the command center of the future reign. Catherine's recovery strengthened that shift in a way no strategy paper ever could. Her absence created concern, but her restraint created loyalty. The public saw patience where others saw opportunity. They saw dignity where others whispered about timing. And because William refused to rush her back into public life, many began to see the Wales family as something rare inside the modern monarchy, disciplined, protective, and emotionally believable. Younger palace staff reportedly noticed it too. They gravitated toward William's leadership structure because it felt clearer, colder, and more future-focused. There was less room for old rivalries, fewer blurred chains of command, and a sharper understanding that the monarchy could not survive by pretending the transition was far away. Behind the scenes, the next court was not being announced. It was being built. Camilla's public role remained visible, but insiders suggest her institutional reach had begun to shrink. She still appeared beside the king. She still occupied her ceremonial place. But influence is not only measured by where someone stands in public. It is measured by whose approval is needed in private, and increasingly the most sensitive decisions appeared to move around her, not through her. Royal journalists began describing what some called a shadow transition, a phrase that unsettled the palace because it sounded too close to the truth. Charles continued his duties with courage and discipline, but reports claimed more private authority was being delegated, softened, or quietly absorbed by those preparing for what came next. The monarchy, in its old instinct for survival, was adjusting before the public was ready to admit it. At the center of that adjustment stood the Wales household. William represented continuity. Catherine represented restraint. Their children represented legitimacy. Together, they became the emotional proof that the crown still had a future beyond exhaustion, rivalry, and private pain. But even as the future court solidified around William and Catherine, the emotional cost of the transformation remained painfully visible inside the family itself. In the end, this was never just about schedules, calendars, or palace administration. It was about succession, control, survival. Reports suggest Prince William understood something others refused to confront. When institutions enter periods of uncertainty, power does not wait politely to be assigned. It moves, quietly, ruthlessly. And according to whispers from inside the palace walls, William made certain that movement would protect Catherine above all else. The alleged Regency framework became more than a private plan. It became a symbol of William's future leadership style: disciplined, protective, and unwilling to let sentiment weaken structure. He did not appear to be building power for its own sake. Supporters framed it as something colder but more necessary, safeguarding the sacred geography of the British monarchy before uncertainty could tear through it. Catherine, in that new order, was not treated as a figure to be pushed forward for reassurance. She was positioned as the protected heart of the monarchy's next era. Her silence carried emotional force. Her recovery became a test of whether the institution could still choose humanity over performance. And William's refusal to let her schedule become a bargaining tool sent a message that reached far beyond palace walls. Camilla's influence, according to insiders, did not disappear. It simply narrowed. Her public role remained ceremonial, supportive, and visible, but the deeper machinery around the future crown had reportedly shifted elsewhere. The old guard still held traditions, titles, and familiar rhythms. But the future-focused restructuring around the Wales family was now impossible to ignore. That divide left the monarchy in an icy but functional peace. Charles continued to carry the dignity of the present reign, while William quietly absorbed the burden of what came next. References to Queen Elizabeth II's long-term planning resurfaced in whispers, as though the late Queen's instinct for succession had returned through the very family she spent decades preparing. And at the center of it all stood the Wales family. William as the stabilizer, Catherine as the emotional anchor, their children as the living promise that the crown would continue beyond illness, rivalry, and private strain. The conflict did not end with applause. It ended the way royal power often does, with silence, closed doors, and a new reality everyone inside the palace understood. Because in the House of Windsor, power is rarely seized through public battles, it is secured through silence, loyalty, and the quiet rewriting of who controls the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.